Catherine Ashford had everything money could buy. At 62, she was the CEO of Ashford Industries, a real estate empire worth $3 billion. She wore designer suits, lived in a penthouse overlooking the city, and commanded respect in every boardroom she entered. But none of that mattered on Thursday afternoons when she visited Oakwood Cemetery. The October air was crisp as Catherine walked through the rows of headstones, her navy blazer pristine, her silver hair perfectly styled. She carried fresh white roses, the same flowers she'd brought every week for the past 7 years. The headstone was simple, elegant. Rachel Claire Ashford, beloved daughter, gone too soon. Catherine knelt down, her knees protesting slightly, and placed the roses in the brass vase. She brushed a few fallen leaves from the granite surface. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't come last week, board meeting in Singapore. But I'm here now." She sat back on her heels, her throat tight. 7 years, and it still felt like yesterday. The car accident that had taken her only child at 32 years old. The funeral where Catherine had stood like a statue, too numb to cry. The years since then, building her empire larger and larger, as if money and power could fill the hole in her heart. A sound made her look up, crying. Soft, muffled crying coming from a few rows over. Catherine stood, irritated. She came here for privacy, for these quiet moments with Rachel. But the crying continued, and something about it pulled at her. It wasn't the wailing of fresh grief. It was the kind of crying that comes from a wound that won't stop bleeding. She walked toward the sound and stopped. A young man, maybe 35 years old, sat on the ground beside a modest headstone. He wore a janitor's uniform, dark blue with a name patch that read Daniel. His brown hair was messy, and his shoulders shook as he cried. In his arms he held a little girl, perhaps 4 years old, with long, brown hair and wide, frightened eyes. She wore a small gray dress with a yellow cardigan, and she clutched a stuffed toy tight to her chest. The child wasn't crying. She just stared at the headstone with a blank expression that Catherine recognized too well, the look of a child who'd cried so much there were no tears left. Catherine should have walked away. She'd spent 7 years avoiding connection, avoiding vulnerability, but her feet wouldn't move. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you all right?" The young man looked up, startled. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes red and swollen. He tried to wipe his face quickly, embarrassed to be caught like this. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "We didn't mean to disturb anyone. We'll go." He started to stand, shifting the little girl in his arms, but Catherine held up her hand. "Please, you're not disturbing me. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Daniel looked at her expensive clothes and her elegant appearance, and seemed to shrink a little. "We're fine, thank you." But he wasn't fine. Catherine could see it in every line of his body. The exhaustion, the grief, the kind of pain that made you forget how to function. Her eyes moved to the headstone. Sarah Elizabeth Porter, loving wife and mother, age 32, the same age Rachel had been. "Your wife?" Catherine asked gently. Daniel nodded, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. 3 months ago, cancer. It happened so fast. 6 weeks from diagnosis to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Catherine's chest tightened. She looked at the little girl who was watching her with those solemn eyes. "And this is your daughter?" "Emma," Daniel said, his hand stroking the child's hair. "She's 4. She doesn't really understand yet why her mama isn't coming home." Catherine's carefully constructed walls began to crack. She looked from the grieving father to the shell-shocked child to the headstone marking a life cut far too short. "May I sit?" she asked. Daniel looked surprised but nodded. Catherine lowered herself to the grass, not caring about her expensive slacks or her dignity. She sat a respectful distance away, her hands folded in her lap. "My daughter's grave is 3 rows over," Catherine said quietly. "Rachel, she was 32 when she died. Car accident. 7 years ago." Daniel's eyes widened. "I'm so sorry, so am I," Catherine said. "Every single day." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 strangers bound by loss. Emma shifted in her father's arms, looking at Catherine with curious eyes. "Pretty," the little girl whispered, pointing at Catherine's pearl earrings. It was the first word Catherine had heard her speak, and it broke something loose in her chest. "Thank you, sweetheart," Catherine said, her voice thick. "Your dress is very pretty, too." Emma looked down at her dress and then back at the headstone. "Mama bought it." Daniel's face crumpled. He pulled Emma closer, burying his face in her hair. "She did, baby. Your mama bought it for your birthday." Catherine watched them, this young father holding his daughter together while falling apart himself. She saw herself 7 years ago, except she'd had no one to hold. She'd grieved alone in her empty penthouse, surrounded by luxury and suffocating in silence. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine said carefully. "What do you do? For work?" Daniel wiped his eyes. "I'm a janitor at Memorial Hospital. Night shift mostly. Sarah was a nurse there. That's how we met." "Who takes care of Emma while you work?" "My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She's 70, but she's kind. She watches Emma for whatever I can pay her." He paused. "Which isn't much. Sarah's medical bills cleaned us out. I'm barely keeping up with rent." Catherine's mind, sharp from decades in business, was already calculating, planning. But this wasn't business. This was something else entirely. "Why are you here at this time of day?" she asked. "Shouldn't you be resting before your shift?" "I work doubles now," Daniel said. "Day cleaning at an office building, nights at the hospital. I had a 2-hour gap, so I brought Emma here. She asks about her mama every day. I don't know what else to do." Emma squirmed out of her father's arms and walked over to Catherine. She stood directly in front of her, studying her face with that serious, too-old expression. "Are you sad too?" Emma asked. Catherine's breath caught. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm very sad. My daughter went to heaven just like your mama." Emma nodded solemnly. "Do they know each other? In heaven?" The question was so innocent, so full of hope, that Catherine couldn't speak for a moment. She looked at Daniel, who was watching them with an expression of mingled grief and wonder. "I think they might," Catherine finally said. "Heaven is a place where people aren't sad anymore, where they can smile and laugh and be happy. I bet they're friends up there." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She climbed into Catherine's lap, completely trusting, and laid her head against Catherine's chest. Catherine froze. She hadn't held a child in 7 years, hadn't allowed herself to get close to anyone. But Emma's small body fit perfectly in her arms, warm and alive and achingly precious. Daniel started to apologize, to retrieve his daughter, but Catherine shook her head. Tears streamed down her face, years of frozen grief finally melting. "It's all right," she whispered. "She's all right." They sat there as the afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows across the graves. 3 people who had lost everything, finding a moment of comfort in the least likely place. Finally, Daniel checked his phone and sighed. "I have to get to my evening shift. Thank you for talking with us. It helped. More than you know." Catherine looked up at him, this young man working himself to death to provide for his daughter, and made a decision, one that would change all their lives. "Daniel, I'd like to help you." He stiffened. "I'm not looking for charity." "It's not charity," Catherine said firmly. "I'm looking for someone to manage the maintenance and facilities for one of my residential properties. It's a full-time position with benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, and there's a small apartment on the property that comes with the job." Daniel stared at her. "I don't understand. You don't even know me." "I know you love your daughter," Catherine said. "I know you work 2 jobs to take care of her. I know you bring her to visit her mother's grave, even though it breaks your heart. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." "Who are you?" Daniel asked, his voice barely audible. "Catherine Ashford. Ashford Industries. And I'm someone who's been alone too long." Over the next 6 months, Daniel and Emma moved into the property Catherine owned, a beautiful estate with gardens and a playground. Daniel managed the maintenance with the same dedication he'd brought to his janitor jobs, and Catherine found herself visiting more and more often. She taught Emma to read. She took them to dinner on Sundays. She helped Daniel enroll in night classes at the community college, and slowly, painfully, the ice around her heart began to thaw. Emma called her Miss Catherine at first, but eventually, tentatively, it became Grandma Kate. The first time it happened, Catherine cried for an hour on the 7th anniversary of Rachel's death, Catherine arrived at the cemetery to find Daniel and Emma already there. They'd brought flowers for Sarah's grave, and flowers for Rachel's too. "We thought you might like company today," Daniel said softly. Catherine looked at them, this makeshift family that had grown from grief and grace. She thought about Rachel, about the grandchildren she'd never have, about the life that had been stolen too soon. But she also thought about Emma, who would grow up knowing that even in the darkest moments, love could find you, that families could be built from broken pieces. That loss didn't have to mean the end of joy. "I would like that very much," Catherine said, taking Emma's hand. They stood together at the graves, three people who had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in sorrow. That sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. And that love, in the end, is always stronger than grief. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like and share it with someone who needs reminded that it's never too late to start over. Subscribe for more stories about finding family in unexpected places. And comment below about a time kindness came from an unexpected source. Your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear today to keep holding on.